Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. The Kremlin says that there is no reason to expect miraculous breakthroughs in peace talks set for Wednesday with Ukraine. Kyiv has confirmed their delegation for the negotiations in Turkey as US officials once again warn Russia about sanctions and tariffs on third-party nations buying Russian energy. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that upcoming trade talks with the EU will be separate from conversations to take place on potential Russian sanctions. Donald Trump has threatened sanctions on Russian oil sales if a ceasefire is not agreed in 50 days. Meanwhile, Scott Bessent has also commented on relations with China as trade tensions ease between the two countries. Bessent calls for more manufacturing in the US and more consumption in China, while also touching on aid for Ukraine. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has urged Israel to stop its wide-scale violations of international law in Gaza. He warned that Israel's actions could amount to war crimes and stressed the need for accountability and international scrutiny. Meanwhile, an Arab League emergency meeting on the ongoing situation in Gaza has taken place. It comes as top European nations are among 28 countries to urge for an immediate end to the war in Gaza. The United States has withdrawn from the United Nations Cultural Organization, also known as UNESCO, saying continued involvement was not in the US's national interest. UNESCO Director General says it's deeply regrettable, Trump's decision. The death toll rises to 31 in the Bangladesh Air Force trainer crash, according to the Special Assistant to the Chief Advisor for Health. The plane slammed into a school and college in Dhaka, leaving dozens more injured. Iran's deputy foreign minister says that reimposing international sanctions would further complicate the nuclear standoff. His warning comes ahead of Friday's talks with the E3, that's Britain, France and Germany, set to take place in Istanbul. We start this hour with President Donald Trump, who has pulled the United States out of the UN Culture and Education Agency known as UNESCO, repeating a move he had already ordered during his first term in office, which had been reversed under Joe Biden's administration. The withdrawal from the Paris-based agency, which was founded after World War II to promote peace through international cooperation in education, science and culture, will take effect on the 31st of December 2026. White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly has said that UNESCO's SIVE culture and social cause are totally out of step with the common sense policies that Americans voted for in November. The State Department also said that remaining in UNESCO was not in the national interest, accusing it of having an agenda that was against the America First foreign policy. UNESCO chief Audrey Azoulay said she deeply regretted Trump's decision, but that it was expected and that UNESCO has prepared for it. Well, joining us to discuss this move and this announcement, Andrew Latham, a professor of international relations, joining us from Minneapolis in the United States. Andrew, as always, thank you for joining us on the programme. The UN says this move was expected, but how big of a step is this from the Trump administration?
Well, in and of itself, it's probably not all that consequential, but seen as part of a bigger picture, it's quite revealing. And it's revealing in two senses. On the one hand, this really is UNESCO and the entire rules-based international order that was constructed after World War II and really globalized after the Cold War is not perceived by Trump and his foreign policy blob, if I can put it that way, as being in America's best interest. They really are interested in re-engineering the world order so that the Americans have more skating room, more leverage, more power. They're not constrained by these international organizations in quite the same way as they have been, or they perceive that they have been. So that's at the level of geopolitics. And then there's the domestic politics dimension to this as well. Trump, as you know, is in trouble in various regards with respect to his MAGA base. And this is something that is likely to resonate with that powerful elements of that base, who look at anything that begins with the letters UN as a bad thing, and anytime the United States can end its membership or find a way to work around its membership is going to be welcomed by that part of the MAGA base. And so we can see Trump using this, I think, as a means of repairing some damage that was done recently with respect to the Epstein file and things like that. But also there is a sound sovereigntist, restrainer, geopolitical dimension to this as well. And when you put those two things together, this is a powerful movement.
Yes, and Andrew, I want to look at the significance of UNESCO itself, of course set up after World War II, looking at peace. Is there a symbolic message being sent here, maybe unintentionally by the Trump administration, through withdrawing for a second time?
Yeah, I think the message is not that the U.S. doesn't want peace. I mean, it wants peace on its terms, obviously. I think the message rather is that UNESCO is pushing progressive politics on a global scale. And that just rubs the Trump camp, the MAGA camp, the wrong way. You know, the entire, to use the Americanism, DEI side of things. It really is a left-wing. It's perceived to be by the Trump gang as pushing a left-wing, Western, progressive agenda on the global scale. It embodies that, it reflects that, and therefore is anathema to the Trump administration and its supporters around the country and indeed around the world. It's to be expected because it happened once before, and then President Biden reversed it. And who knows what the next administration will do if it's a Democratic administration. But this move is entirely consistent with the DNA, political DNA of both Donald Trump and the MAGA movement.
Yes, absolutely. Andrew, if you do stay with us, we're going to move away directly from this, but look towards tariffs with, of course, a US aspect to it. And amid the ongoing trade war between the European Union and the United States, Industry Minister Mark Faracci has stated that France is demanding greater firmness from the European Union in its tariff negotiations. Trade negotiations between Washington and Brussels are continuing ahead of the August 1st deadline. This comes as US President Donald Trump has vowed to impose 30% tariffs on nearly all goods imported from the European Union. Both sides are reportedly looking to carve out exemptions for key sectors such as aviation or pharmaceuticals. While speaking on EU-US trade talks, Mark has said that the French industry is united behind the EU's position. Let's listen in.
Ça signifie également mobiliser des outils qui n'ont pas encore été utilisés jusqu'à présent, et en particulier ce que l'on appelle l'outil anti-coercition. C'est un outil qui est de nature non tarifaire, mais qui peut se traduire par des contrôles à l'export, qui peut se traduire par des restrictions à la publicité en ligne pour les plateformes numériques, qui peut se traduire par un certain nombre d'outils qui sont nécessaires aujourd'hui pour se mettre dans une posture de négociation qui soit plus ferme et qui soit plus crédible. Nous avons besoin, au fond, risque. Nous faisons tout pour être dans une posture d'échange, de dialogue, mais à un moment ou à un autre, il faut aussi mettre sur la table des options qui permettent à la négociation de se concrétiser. Et je pense que, de ce point de vue...
Well, once again with us, Andrew Latham, thank you for staying with us. Of course, trade deadlines looming and trade discussions have been ongoing since the start of April and Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcements. But here we're hearing from a key nation within the European Union about firmness in these talks. What message is that sending to the Trump administration?
One intentional and one unintentional. I mean, the idea that France would work through the European Union to protect its export industry. And it's willing, the French are willing to accept some increase in tariffs, by the way, but not with respect to what they consider to be strategic sectors: automobiles, wines and spirits, pharmaceuticals, the usual suspects. So they're willing to do a deal, but they think, well, certainly Macron and his government seem to believe that the only way to get that deal is to play hardball, to use an Americanism. That remains to be seen. The second observation is Trump's deadlines are worthless because they're forever being deferred and delayed. So the August 1st thing, it could end up being bumped down the road quite a bit, but that's parenthetical. The other element here that's really interesting is the Germans don't agree with this. Chancellor Merz wants a deal. He wants a deal fast. He wants a deal that will be better than the worst possible outcome, but he's willing to make compromises that the French are not. So we're seeing intra-European Union friction and tensions in terms of how to deal with Donald Trump and his tariff threats, et cetera. One is, let's just do a deal and put this to bed. And the other one is, let's fight like heck until we get the best possible deal, and then maybe we'll put it to bed. And of course, the French being pitted against the Germans, well, historically, that's not unusual. But they are at the center of constellations of EU countries, and it remains to be seen exactly who ends up being in which camp. So, big geopolitical picture, also domestic politics in France. Macron's government is in some trouble, not particularly popular, so standing up for French industry and French exports makes him look better, like a national champion. And of course, the American domestic pieces that Trump's tariff deadlines never seem to hold, are not firm, let's put it charitably.
Yes, and Andrew, I want to delve deeper into that division that you're talking about potentially in Europe. Of course, this is a unique situation, a 27-nation bloc who all have their own industries which could be affected by these tariffs. Also, with the EU looking at potential areas of sort of relief and sanctions, sorry, not sanctions, tariffs that will be minimal compared to that base 30% rate. How do those discussions happen internally to then be formulated in a united front with a US administration who, let's be honest, has been very frank and very firm that they're looking for the best deal that they can get possible?
My sense is that European Union policy is a function of lowest common denominator, because everybody more or less has to agree. And everybody's willing to moderate or modulate their position to some extent, but there are serious red lines beyond which Hungary won't shift, and Germany won't shift, and France won't shift. And so we've got a lowest common denominator policy coming out at the level of the European Union. And then after that, then you've got the European Union and you've got Brussels and Washington in negotiations. And again, my sense is it's going to be the lowest common denominator. I know the French think they can, quote unquote, win. Donald Trump always thinks he can win, although he's a little more inclined to do a deal, any deal, as long as it meets his basic needs. And so I think, my suspicion is, my working hypothesis is, we're going to get lowest common denominator out of Brussels, and then Washington and Brussels, another lowest common denominator. It will probably be enough to satisfy everybody. Nobody will get exactly what they want. But Trump has proven that he's willing, with respect to Canada, for example, he's basically let Canadian imports in duty-free as long as they're compliant with the USMCA agreement, or as they call it in Canada, the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement. So he's really somewhat flexible despite his fiery rhetoric. He really is into doing deals. And I think that logic is likely to hold true with respect to Washington and Brussels. Once Brussels gets its act together and they sit down and start talking across the table with Washington, I think as long as Trump can come out looking good, he's willing to compromise. And as long as the European Union looks good at the end of the day, they're willing to compromise, hence lowest common denominator.
Yes, absolutely, Andrew. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us on both of those topics. We will, of course, continue to bring you all of the updates from ongoing trade discussions between the US and other nations, including the European Union. But we move on now and head to the Middle East. A Syrian investigation into sectarian violence in the Alawite heartland has revealed 1,426 deaths. The violence, which took place over 3 days in early March, targeted predominantly Alawite civilians. A committee identified 298 suspects linked to the killing, including summary executions, torture, looting and destruction of homes. Authorities have pointed to loyalist gunmen as being behind the attacks, which also killed 238 security personnel. Human rights groups have called for full transparency in the investigation. This violence is the latest in a series of sectarian clashes, raising concerns over Syria's ability to manage growing tensions. Let's listen in now to what committee spokespersons have had to say.
حققت اللجنة من أسماء 1426 قتيلا، منهم 90 امرأة، والبقية معظمهم مدنيون، وبعضهم عسكريون سابقون أجروا تسويات مع السلطات المختصة، وبالرغم من عدم استبعاد اللجنة وجود عناصر من الفلول بين القتلى ترجح أن معظم حوادث القتل وقعت خارج أو بعد انتهاء المعارك.
Well, joining us is Eric Wahlberg, a political analyst from Toronto, to speak to us live about this report and this situation. Firstly, Eric, let's look at the wider picture in Syria. Of course, sectarian violence and deaths being reported. This report saying that in an Alawite majority area, over 1,400 deaths. How significant is this for the stability of Syria as sanctions are lifted and efforts towards stabilisation after, of course, over a decade of civil war? How difficult is this for Syria to move past, and what needs to be looked at in order to avoid violence like this flaring up again?
Well, it's very significant, and it is very predictable. That was the whole point of supporting Assad, because he was able to hold the country together. He was not persecuting minorities. He was persecuting the Sunni more than anyone else. So that really was the issue that people, Syrians, turned against him for his own dictatorship, that it was not a pleasant regime, it was not democratic. But the opposition was even worse, as we see. It's Al-Qaeda, and the dirty politics of U.S.-Israel is just appalling, because they support Al-Qaeda. They secretly support Al-Qaeda right from bin Laden through to today, through Iraq. The horrors there. The U.S. pretends to be fighting it, but at the same time it supports it. So this shows you how confused and contradictory U.S.-Israeli policy is. They think that somehow they can turn these Al-Qaeda people into well-meaning, law-abiding Western lackeys. But that's not how Al-Qaeda see themselves. And they want to kill and torture anyone that they think is heathen, kuffar. They have this very rigid interpretation of Islam, which leads them to mass killings, as they've done to the Alawite and as they're doing to the Druze. These are two minorities that are more Shia than Sunni. And so the Sunni Al-Qaeda want to wipe them out, very much like Israel wants to wipe out Palestinians. It's the same totalitarian, chauvinistic thinking. So that's where we stand with Syria. It's just going to get worse. And as it falls apart, Israel will undoubtedly just occupy and take over southern Syria. In fact, what Israel wants to do, it's already warned Lebanon. They said, if you don't get rid of Hezbollah, then we will use Greater Syria as a platform to occupy Lebanon and turn it into a Greater Syria, which then would be under Israeli dominance, Israeli control. So that's where we're moving to in the Middle East. It's a very horrifying scenario.
Eric, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. We will continue to bring you all the developments from Syria, but we now move onwards. We stay in the Middle East, but look towards Gaza, and the UN Relief Agency, known as the UNRWA, has reported worsening conditions in the Gaza Strip, with staff fainting on duty due to hunger and exhaustion. Juliet Tuma, UNRWA's communications director, says that soaring food prices, a lack of basic supplies and rising malnutrition are severely affecting both workers and civilians. Tuma urged international media to visit Gaza and document the crisis firsthand. She also revealed that while 6,000 trucks of aid are stranded in Jordan and Egypt, no humanitarian deliveries have been allowed into Gaza since March. Meanwhile, fewer distribution points and increased violence have hindered aid efforts on the ground. Let's have a look at what Juliet Tuma, the UNRWA Director of Communications, had to say.
It's like I said, for the past 48, 72 hours, we've been receiving SOS messages from staff who are hungry themselves, who are exhausted themselves, who are supposed to be taking care of others and providing humanitarian assistance, except they are exhausted. We've had on a number of cases our own staff fainting while they were on duty. And these are staff who work with UNRWA full-time.
Well, joining us to discuss the ongoing situation in Gaza, Ali Emma Bushback, a Middle East researcher who joins from Cairo. Ali, thank you for once again joining us on the programme. Further questions being raised about the humanitarian situation in the enclave. The UNRWA saying that workers are also facing hunger, with other charities and organisations talking about levels of famine, with reports of people dying in Gaza because of starvation. Due to your position, of course, as a Middle East researcher, what can you tell us about what you've been hearing firsthand on the ground in Palestine and in Gaza?
Thank you, Joshua. The thing is, since Israel resumed the war on 15th of March 2025, Gaza is suffering from a complete blockade from the Israelis' policy and from the Israeli occupation. The things is making the situation worse and making the humanitarian situation miserable and behind the imagination. Joshua, today I was talking to some people who's from Gaza, and they are to describe the situation while there is still people are, they are killing in the what I call a death ambush when they are gathering to take the humanitarian aid and capturing the humanitarian aid. They got killed by Israelis troops and Israeli gunfire. So the things is more behind the imagination. When I asked some people about the market, they said there is nothing, there is no element, and there is no supplies in the market. And if it's possible to find it, it's high, expensive, which the ordinary people, they can't purchase it. That's making the people more frustrated and making the people, in tragic ways about the conflict and the situation in Gaza. United Nations have been called for several of time and warning about the humanitarian situation in Gaza and the famine in Gaza. But unfortunately, the international community only condemned, and we have witnessed several of international actors from France and UK. They condemned the Israelis' behavior that weaponizing the food in this war. So the things is more complicated. Simultaneously, Israel is still denying the famine in Gaza. This is a harder barriers in the conflict between Gaza and Israel, while people on the ground, they are starving to death. And according to Palestinian health ministry, there is more than 40 Palestinians have been died because of the starvation, among them 4 children. Israel is still denying this fact. Situation, and all the humanitarian agency in Gaza, they are warning from this starvation.
Yes.
And I guess things is more complicated and situation. There is no global of home for the Gazan civilians, while they are looking for everyday pieces for food and to continue. There is several of people, they are for 5 days they didn't have anything, Joshua. They just only had the water, which it's behind the imagination. I talked to many people, and they are trustable people, reliable people. They confirmed that they just had water since past 4 or 3 days.
Yes, Ali, if you do stay with us, thank you for that insight as well. We're going to stay in Gaza as 2 senior Christian leaders, Latin Patriarch Pizzaballa and Greek Orthodox Patriarch Theophilus III, have visited the enclave following an Israeli strike that reportedly killed 3 people at the Holy Family Catholic Church. They met local Christians, visited damaged churches and brought aid and medical supplies. The visit was facilitated by aid agencies amid ongoing violence. Addressing the media, the clerics called for an end to the strikes and urged protection for civilian and holy sites. Israel called the strike a mistake. Pope Leo XIV expressed his sadness and renewed calls for a ceasefire. According to reports, nearly 60,000 people have been killed in Gaza since the war began in October. Let's listen now to Theophilus III, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, and Pier Battista Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem.
Our presence there, it was very important because it was a sign of encouragement, and we made people understand that they are not abandoned. Maybe they are abandoned by the international community or for the powers who are in charge, right? But they're not abandoned by us. And of course, we talk about everybody without any discrimination whatsoever. Thank you.
And today we raise our voices in an appeal to the leaders of this region and the world. There can be no future based on captivity, displacement of Palestinians, or revenge. There must be a way that restores life, dignity, and all lost humanity.
Well, Ali, thank you for staying with us. We don't have too much longer, but I do want to, of course, look at the continued grounds offensive. Staying away from the situation on the ground, I want to shift attention to diplomacy. Of course, Israel saying they're going to continue their offensive in Gaza until a ceasefire can be agreed. What pressure is needed on both sides to make sure that these conversations and discussions mediated by the US, Egypt and Qatar taking place in Doha actually results in concrete action and a real end to the conflict that is affecting so many on both sides in the region?
Joshua, I guess the negotiation it's reached to the stalemate way that there is any solution. There is more than 1 month since the beginning of this month. Donald Trump, he said he's so hopeful at the end of this week, at the beginning of coming week, there is a good news for the Palestinian and for the captive families. I guess there is no global hope. I guess that what is happening and the statement of the diplomatic way is just only to manipulating the people's mental, because there is a global pressure on Israel and that practicing on Israel and Hamas as well as to accept the deal and to reach to ceasefire between and end this kind of war. But what I am seeing, what I have seen that since past the beginning of this year, also Donald Trump, when he housed the White House, he was saying that there is he's confirming that the war in Gaza it's going to end and etc. etc. But we are today, it's July, after 7th month of his housing, there is no any progress in the situation in Gaza. One hand, and then on other hand, I guess Hamas is not going to surround for Israel. Hamas is not going to demilitarize, and it's not going to giving its weapon. And Hamas has no issue for the Palestinian who got killed, the civilian casualties. And we have, if we will discourse analyze the leader of Hamas speech, we realize that the value of people, it has no meaning for Hamas leaders until unless they are still in power. So in my opinion, what is going on the ground, it's worth, and it's showing that Israel practicing the pressure in Hamas, and at the same time Hamas practicing the pressure by releasing a footage and video for the Israeli captive. They are under the tent, the tunnel, and etc. And they are asking for pressuring the Israeli government. On the ground, also Israelis captive family, they are taking the street to pressure the Benjamin Netanyahu, while Benjamin Netanyahu is not showing any part of the flexibility in the negotiation. So I guess that things is more complicated. There is no global hope nowadays, since I guess the situation on the ground it's terrible, Joshua.
Yes, Ali, absolutely. We are unfortunately out of time, but of course, as optimism wanes, there is still hope for discussions to lead to peace in some form or another. Thank you, Ali Emma Bushback, for joining us. We'll bring you all the updates on those ceasefire talks as they happen. But now it's time for us to head to some news from the Indo-Pacific region. Flash floods caused by heavy monsoon rains in northern Pakistan swept away several vehicles carrying tourists, killing at least 5 people and leaving 15 others missing. The floods were triggered by a cloudburst which also stranded over 200 local tourists after a key highway was blocked in the northern Chilas district. However, rescue operations, including army helicopters, have been deployed to evacuate women and children. The floods and landslides have also buried vehicles under rubble, with rescuers using heavy machinery to search for missing people. The initial results in the investigation into the December Jeju air crash in South Korea have revealed that both of the plane's engines suffered bird strikes. However, the pilots turned off the less damaged engine just before the crash landing. This finding, suggesting human error, sparked outrage among bereaved families and fellow pilots, who accused authorities of trying to shift responsibility to the deceased pilots. Meanwhile, the South Korean Aviation Investigation Board had planned to release the results on the 19th of July, but cancelled the press briefing after strong protests from the families. And Tropical Storm Whipper made landfall in northern Vietnam, bringing strong winds and heavy rains to the country's north and central regions. With maximum winds of 102 kilometers per hour, Whipper weakened from a typhoon to a tropical storm before reaching land. The storm knocked out power in Hưng Yên province and residents rushed to gas stations. However, in Hanoi, the streets were nearly empty as most businesses closed and authorities advised residents to stay home.